Now I'll save this test. Now, another tricky question is that sometimes in the interviews it's also asked, suppose I have got two browsers opened, fine, and as you know QTP can test on multiple browsers, it can do, but it cannot test on multiple Windows based applications. That is, only one instance of Windows based application should be opened, but multiple instances of a browser can be opened. Now suppose I've got two browsers opened and both of them are on the Yahoo site. Fine. Both of them have the same URL opened. How will QTP come to know which browser to test on? Okay, for example, I record and I open Mozilla and I take it to yahoo.com. Fine. And I open another Mozilla and I take it to yahoo.com. Okay, on each yahoo.com I go to the mail. On both the browsers I click on the mail link. Fine. So technically speaking, what I have done, I have opened two browsers which are on the same website. Fine. If you open QTP now, look at the commands which have been generated. Okay, by mistake this has been generated by 2 times. Okay, so okay, not 2 times, not by mistake. This has to be over here. Okay, so I actually clicked my mouse by mistake. Okay, now I have the same code over here and over here. Now how will the repository look like? The object repository looks like this. There are two browsers object. I can rename them. I can rename my browser as first browser and second one as second browser. Okay, it's not necessary that the first browser will be on the top, second will be on the bottom. It's on the alphabetical manner. Fine. In each browser has got its own set of pages and own set of objects. So that's one of the points. And one more thing, that each browser in the properties has a property creation time. The browser which is opened first is having the creation time as 0. The browser which is opened after that is having creation time as 1. So you have got creation times associated with each and every browser. Suppose I open an IE, after that I open a Mozilla, then again an IE, then again a Mozilla, then again an IE, then again a Mozilla. So what will happen? The first IE will have creation time as 0, then Mozilla will have creation time 1, then IE as 2, Mozilla 3. So it's an increasing order. It's independent of the type of browser you are testing on as well. Fine. This creation time we will be using as we proceed. When we actually see how to work without object repository, we'll see this creation time. For time being, remember that browsers are identified, multiple browsers are distinguished with the help of creation time. Fine. So looking at this, we have done pretty good. We are going pretty good. Fine. Now what we need to do is we need to see the Windows based applications. Fine. For example, I'll again take the old example of calculator. Okay, this is a simple calculator. When I click on 9, then I click on 3, I click on some buttons. Fine. So what happens is that it's the same, exactly same. The window class object, this is the window class object whose name is calculator. You see, window calculator dot win button 9. That means inside this there is a win button 9 dot click. So I can change this name 9 to NINE as well. It will change in the code as well. But I cannot delete this and write 1 over here because 1 is not present in object repository. It will throw an immediate error that object 1 was not present in object repository, was not found in object repository. Okay, so the classes are different for Windows based applications and web based applications, but the concept is same. The hierarchy in which the code is generated is same. You can also drag drop the code like this. I can just delete these lines and I can start dragging the code like this. Fine. So this is our Windows based application, and this is basically the Windows based calculator. Fine. So now we will see some basic features of object repository. I'll create a new test. What will happen as soon as I create a new test, object repository will go blank. The memory will go blank because every test is supposed to have a new memory. Fine. Till now what we have seen is that object repository is formed whenever you record and run your application. If I'm recording and running my application, only then object repository will be made. You can make your object repository, you can put objects in your object repository without without running or recording. I'm sorry about that. You can actually create an object repository without recording your application. Fine. How do you do that? You can add the objects in the object repository manually. There are two ways to add the object. Fine. I'll demonstrate both the ways. There are two ways to add the objects manually into the object repository. Okay. Suppose this is the browser, fine, and I want to add the sign in button, this sign in button of Yahoo into my object repository. How I used to do it was I used to click on the record button and click on this. Now what I will do is I will make sure that this Yahoo is behind QTP the way we do it in SPY, but instead of spying I will click on this button. In object repository, this is a button known as add objects to local. When you click on this, again like spy, QTP disappears and the application under test, that is the application which is behind QTP, will appear. Make sure the application under test is behind QTP, and instead of a mouse you will get this hand symbol. Fine. You click on this sign in button. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, this button is being identified as a web element. Why is it being identified as a web element? We'll talk about it later on. Let's not go into confusion. Let's not put a confusion over here. Or let me try adding Yahoo ID. Find this input box. Right? I'll click on this add button, then click on this input box. And this is again a web element. These Yahoo guys, they're very smart. Let's go to say timesofindia.com. okay, and I want to add this link, the top link, into the object repository, which is the news link. Fine. I click on this add objects to local and then click on this link, and I get the same hierarchy as in object spy. I again repeat, I click on this add objects to local, QTP disappears, you again click on this link and you add this. Fine. Why was I getting an web element in Yahoo page? I'll talk about it later on. Fine. I don't want to confuse this topic, so I'm taking a simple example. Fine. So I get this link in the object repository. I'll again show it to you. I'll delete this browser and you simply select it and press the delete button to delete it. You click on add button, click here and click on OK. Fine. Now you can drag this link in the code. Fine. A better and a simple and a easy example would be that I open the calculator. Suppose I have to multiply 9 and 6. So I click on the add button, I add 9 into the repository. I click on the add number, I click on the add and I add 6 into the object repository. Then again I click on add, I add, okay, calculator is again gone. Yeah, I click on add and I'll minimize this, I'll close this, I'll minimize everything. maximize calculator, maximize QTP. Fine. Add this multiplication sign into the repository. And I can simply drag 9, then drag multiply, and then drag 6. So 9 multiplied by 6 will be run. The QTP will run this provided that your calculator is opened. Fine, because I have not given the command for opening the calculator. Another way to add the objects. This was one way to add the objects in object repository. Another way, which is a new feature of QTP 11, is that suppose I'm on the website cnn.com. Fine, and I want to add the object. Let it open. Fine, and I want to add this edit box. This edit box in which I have written into the object repository. Okay, so you open QTP and open your spy. Fine. Now using spy you can see which object is at which place. I told you this, right? And you can move your spy by pressing Control button and moving this window. Fine. Now when you go to this input box over here, this is identifying this as an web edit. Fine. In the spy on the left hand side, I can see that there's a browser, there's a page, and inside it there's a web edit. Click on this web edit and QTP will come back. Fine. Now you see the same add button in object spy as well. Add object to repository. You click on this and this input box will be added into object repository. You see that? Here is the input box added, and out here you will have a small object repository sign coming up symbolizing that this object is in object repository. If you click on the button next to it, this small cube, fine, if you click on it, this is known as highlight in application. If you click on it, the input box will be highlighted. I'll show it to you again. You click on this and this input box will be highlighted. Fine. So this is how you can add the object with the help of spy. This is a very handy feature if you are working with object spy. If you are working with object repository in your project, then this feature can really help you out. Fine. Some people, they actually think that working without object repository is actually a better thing than working with object repository. It's not at all the case. You can work with object repository, or you can use VB scripting and work without object repository. It's not that while working with object repository you don't need VB scripting. You still need it. You still need a lot of knowledge on VB scripting while working with object repository as well. Fine. So it's your decision, your own decision, how you're gonna work. Fine. Yes, it is said that if the size of object repository becomes too big, fine, then the script can go slow. Right. I never did that because frankly telling you, I don't work without object repository. So sorry, I work without object repository whenever I work with QTP. To make you understand the concepts of object repository, I'm telling you this module. Fine. So I've never practically experienced that issue that if the size of object repository is too big, if there are thousands of objects in object repository, the application will not be that fast. Well, if you test it, it will not be that fast. I've never experienced that, but I've heard that. Fine. So now there are two ways to add: through this add button and through object spy. Okay. Now the second button over here. What is this button? This button is update from application. Fine. And third is define a new object. Fourth is highlight in application. We will be looking at, we just looked at it. You click on it and this will be highlighted. Fine. It's there in the object spy as well. Locate in repository and spy is again over there, and associate repository. So we'll talk about each of these features over here right now. Fine. And before talking about them, suppose I have I want to talk about a situation in which I want to add all the objects of the page in the object repository. That is, whatever's there in this cnn.com landing page, I want everything, every link, every web element, every button, each and everything, every image to be there, to be included in my object repository. How do you do that? You click on the add button, either from spy, either from here, wherever you like, and click anywhere in the page. Fine, click anywhere in the page. I will click over here, and from this hierarchy you select the page. Why am I selecting the page? I am selecting the page because I want all the objects within the page. Fine, you click on OK and this window will come up. Define object filter. Fine, you select the option all object types from it. We'll see the other options in some time. Fine, I select the option all object types and I click on OK. So what will happen is all the objects from that page will be added into the repository. Okay, hold on for some time, it is adding the objects. Okay, so you can add all the objects on a particular page as well into the object repository. So all the objects will be the part of the same page. You see that it is getting added. There are so many objects. Fine, if I want to see where is the link about us, you click on this highlight an application cube, this small cube, and that link is highlighted. You see that this is the link, it was highlighted. Fine, if I want to do the other way around, if I want to go the other way around, if I want to find that where is the link apple in my object repository. Now my object repository is very big, I don't know which thing is where, right? And I want to find that where is the link apple in my object repository. Okay, you simply go to the object repository and click on this icon, locate in repository. Fine, when you click on this locate in repository, QTP disappears. When QTP disappears, you click on this apple link. Fine, you click on this apple link and this window comes up. Okay, and you click OK. Alright, oh wait a minute, it's actually giving it as a web element. Actually I want to find this link apple, so I'll select this link. Okay, click on OK and this is there. In the hierarchy it is actually showing a web element in between. It's actually showing there's a link and inside it there's a web element. You should actually select link over here and click OK, and this is the link which is there. This is the link in the repository. Fine, so highlight an application and locate in repository, these are opposite of each other. Fine, and tomorrow suppose this link changes, the apple link actually changes. Fine, and I have to update this link. Suppose a developer, what he does, he names this link as Mac Apple. Fine, something like that. So I need to change my repository as well. Being a tester, I am obliged to change the repository because the application has changed. Then you need to click on this, then you need to highlight the object first. Fine, and then click on this icon, update from application. Okay, you can click on this, QTP will disappear. Fine, and click on the apple again, select the link and say OK. So this will update it. Fine, however the link is same right now, I'm just updating it. Fine, so this is adding, this is updating. Adding is for creating new object repository, updating is to maintain the object repository. So with the help of this icon you can maintain your object repository, you can maintain your objects. This is locate in repository and this is simply highlight an application, this is spy. Now this cube over here, define new test object, you click on it and a window will come up. right? You can actually define your own test object here. For example, I want to define my own button. I click on web button. I give the web button name as username. Okay, the type for all the buttons is input. All the buttons have the type input. Okay, I'll give it a name, say email, and HTML tag is input. Okay, for example, I'll just tell you, use spy. If you have any input box, any web edit on this page, yeah. So this web edit has got three types. The type is text. I'm sorry, that's what I was wondering. I'm doing something wrong. Okay, I have the web button or a web edit. Okay, web edit. Here is it. Okay, web edit has the type as text. I will name it as a username. Input type is text. Name. Now name is the property which the developer is going to give to that web edit. Name is the property which spy will tell you. Okay, I'll just close this. When I spy any object, most of the objects have the property name. For example, this input box over here, fine, this will have a name. The name property of this input box is query. Fine. So while defining a new object yourself manually, okay, you can write that I want a new input box whose name is username, type is text, name is say email. So this email will be the one which the developer would have assigned it. Okay, and HTML tag will be input. Fine, and the rest of the properties I'm just keeping it like that, and I click on add button. So what will happen is that, oh, I have added this inside query. Okay, I'll just delete it. I will first click on the page because I need to add it on the page. I'll click on page, add. I'll tell you why this is used. Okay, I will tell you why this is used in some time. Why do you need to create an object yourself? Add. So this is the object which has been added. You can drag this object as well. Fine. Now, sometimes the HP guys, what they say is that you can also start building the test script of your application even when the application is not ready. Even if the application is not live, you can start building the test script. All you need to do is you need to make sure that you have the correct information from the developer. You'll tell developer, fine, okay, you're going to code, you're going to write the business logic, fine, but just tell me about the front end layer part. Tell me what will be the name of that input box. Okay, tell me what will be the name of that link, something like that, because if I have to form a link to, oh sorry, if I have to make a link myself, right, if I have to make a link when the application is not there, I'm going to make it from this option, right? I'll have to select link, I'll have to give some name of the link, and I have to have the text. So this text has to be from the developer. So QA guys can fix up with developers. They can ask for a document with the names and text for each and every link, input boxes, and all lot of stuff, and they can create their own objects over here, drag the objects, and when the application is ready they can test it. But it's a very bad idea. Why it's a very bad idea? It's a very bad idea because whenever the application is being made, okay, obviously it'll get a lot of bugs in the beginning. Okay, so you have to test the application manually. I'm talking in terms of practicality here. Some in books, whatever is written in the books, that's fine. You can start making a script when QTP is actually when the application is actually under development. That's in the books. Fine, you can do it. You can make your own objects here. You can fix up a meeting with developer and you can do it. You can create the objects, you can drag them. But practically speaking, whenever a big application is made, there are a lot of defects. You cannot spoil your time testing it with the help of automation tools. So you have to test it manually, bring it in the regression phase, bring the application stable, and only after that you can start using QTP to test it. QTP is a tool which is actually used in regression testing. Selenium, these are functional testing tools. You should actually use them while testing, while doing the regression testing, while doing the regression builds. Fine. In If you want to do it this way, while the application is being developed, you want to make your own framework, you want to make your own script, you can do that. That's not a big issue. Fine. But your efforts might go in waste because the application might be changed. Fine. After developing the application, business comes to know, fine, this is the difficulty, remove this module, change this button, bring this button here. So you will go mad sometimes changing your object repository. Okay, so my personal opinion is don't do that. Fine. If your manager is asking you to do that, if your company is asking you to do that, then you cannot help it, you have to do that. But if you have your own personal decision, don't do that. Test it manually, make it stable, and after that automate it. Fine. So this is the answer to the simple question, simple age-old question which many people ask me: how can I test, how can I create a script of my application if the application is not present? You have to open your object repository, go to this button, add all the properties of the object and do it. Fine. You have to fix up a meeting with developer, you have to be in sync with the development team for this. Okay, right? So this is about the features of object repository, how you can create an object repository, how you can actually create it manually, add objects from it, or you can drag objects, you can do a lot of things. Fine. Okay, now if I have a friend of mine, okay, my friend, he tells me, fine, I need your object repository. How do I give him the object repository? Getting the doubt here, you're getting the question. Fine. My friend, he's sitting in US and he calls me up and I'm sitting in, say, Europe, right? And I want to send him my object repository. How can I send it? I don't want to send him my script. I just want to send him my object repository. For that, you have to store your object repository on your hard disk and mail that into a file basically, and mail that file to him. How do you store your object repository on the hard disk? You simply say file and select the option export local objects. Fine. Export local objects. You go here and you select this option, select the place where you're gonna export. I will say that fine, I want to put this in my H drive as my repository. Okay, it will be saved as a .tsr file. Fine. The repository file is known as .tsr file. So you save it. Fine. And go to my computer H drive, and this is the file. You can mail your friend that file. Okay, and now I'll make a new test, right? I'll open my object repository, and what I want is that I want to open up that object repository file. I want to include that object repository file into this repository. Okay, so what do? I click on this last icon, associate repositories. Okay, I want to import the objects from that repository into my test. So you click on this, a window will open up for associating the repositories. You click on this plus sign and you select the repository file.tsr. See, it's giving you a QTP while showing this, it's showing you as an icon of object repository. Okay, you click on it and select action 1 from here. I told you that every test has an action, every test can have multiple actions. When we proceed further, we will study about actions as well. For time being, just accept that you have to drag the action 1 here on the right hand side and click OK. So I have this object repository added. I have this object repository with me. But now the problem is I cannot edit it. I cannot change the name of the objects. Though I can drag the objects, I can generate the code by dragging the objects. I cannot change this object repository. Fine. This type of object repository is known as shared object repository. The repository which we were making earlier is known as the local object repository. I'll tell about shared object repository in more detail in some time. But get your concept cleared. That is, the object repository which is made while recording is your local object repository. The object repository which is made when you add the objects manually is your local object repository. When you actually associate the repositories from here, that is a shared object repository. You cannot directly edit that object repository. Fine. In order to edit the shared object repository, you need a functionality known as object repository manager. See on the top under resources, the second option, object repository manager. This is capable of editing your TSR files. This has got a lot of other features as well. Fine, but this can actually, when you open this, you can go to this. First of all, when you open that, a new window opens up. Okay, this is my QTP. Look down below on the right side. This is my QTP and this is my object repository manager window. The window for object repository manager is different than QTP. I'm going to open my TSR file. You can go to file, open and select my repository.tsr. You can expand it. Fine. And you can click on this icon, enable editing. Okay. As soon as you click it, the shaded colors, the shade goes away. Fine. Now I click on this image 1. Alright, I click on this image 1. The class of this object is image. Name is 1. I will name it, suppose, capital A so many times. Right. Hit enter. It gets changed over here and I will save this. So what happens is that when you open QTP, it's changed inside QTP as well. You see that? Right? Suppose I use this link. I use this link Europe. I drag this link into the code. So I am using this link in the code. This link is in the repository, and I go to my object repository manager. Go to the link Europe and I change the spelling to EURO. That's it. Hit enter and save it. Now when I go back to my code, the changes would be automatically reflected. Okay, don't change it over here. I told you earlier as well, these are the object properties, keep them as they are. This is just the external name, the mapping parameter, you can change it. Okay, when you go back to my code, I go back to QTP, fine. See, the euro has changed over here as well as code. That means that if I am using a shared repository, okay, if this is my shared repository and I am sharing it with one test, and this is my shared repository, this is my test, and there is an object over here X and the object is over out here as well. If I open this shared repository in my object repository manager ORM and change it, it will be changed out here as well as in the code. So local object repository is something which you can edit locally, which you can add locally, or which you can increase locally by recording, running or adding objects manually. But the shared object repository is something which you have to include in your test and edit it through object repository manager. Now, why do we use shared object repository? What is the advantage of using shared object repository? Okay, suppose that I have a project going on and 6 automation testers are working on that project. Fine. So here are my 6 automation testers working on the project. Fine. And this is the project. Okay. Now if I distribute the whole project among them. Fine. Now this guy over here is making his own script. He's making his own script and he's making his own script. Okay. Although they are working in different modules, fine, they will be working on different modules independent of each other. They will be automating independent modules of this application. Fine. I will actually divide this application into various parts and give each part to everybody. Fine. But the problem which will arise is that some of the objects might be common for all the parts. For example, a very simple thing, each and every of them will have to log in inside the application. So the login username, login password and the sign in button, these 3 objects will be used by each and every one of them. So these objects will be present in each and every repository which these guys have, right? So what we do practically is that instead of asking them to make their own individual repository and later on they will try to merge the repository, whatever they have to do they'll try to do and then experience problems again. Fine. What we prefer doing is, these are my testers, automation testers. They share a common repository. I make a common repository, I add all the objects in the repository and then give them this. Right? So if this guy has made 3 test cases, if this guy has made 2, if this guy has made 5 test cases, and if this person has made just 1 test case. Fine. And if the application object changes, so I just have to change the object in my shared object repository, and as we saw, when you change it in the shared object repository, it automatically reflects in the test. It will reflect in the test of each and every tester. Theoretically speaking, this is easy. Practically speaking, it can be implemented, but there are sometimes some confusions as well. Fine. So the way we proceed is before we start the automation phase. Fine. If you are using object repository, then before starting that phase, in this phase we actually identify our objects and build our object repository, and only after that we proceed to the next phase and drag the objects and build the script. We make our TSR file first. In this phase we distribute the TSR file to every tester, and then in the next phase we actually implement the automation. This is in the case if you are using object repository. This is the ideal way. Okay, ideal way for automating your regression test cases. Fine. So now I will take up a small example. Now I am going to take up an example which I will be using in my further modules as well, when I will show you how to parameterize the test cases, when I'll show you how to use regular expressions and all everything. So I'm going to use an application now which I will start automating, which I will store in my common place on my hard disk. Later on you can download it as well, but I will keep on adding to that application as I teach on, as I go on teaching you new things. You must be wondering that I taught you a lot about VB scripting, but I'm not using VB scripting right now. I'm not using a while loop, I'm not using a for loop. That will be used, that will be used in the next module. Fine. So have patience, understand the concepts, and I have told you the concept of object repository. I'm almost done with it. I'm on my shared object repository. Now I will make you realize that how can we actually use the shared object repository concept in real-time project. Fine. Before taking up that small project, okay, I want to complete this merging object repositories. Fine. Defining new test objects, I just told you this topic is for building a repository in case your application is not available. Fine. Merging object repositories. Okay, how do you merge two object repositories? That is, suppose I have got two TSR files, right? I have suppose I make a new test. Fine. I click on this Africa link over here. Fine. And I add the all objects of this page in my object repository. Okay, and I save my object repository on the hard disk. This is africa.tsr. So on my hard disk I actually have two object repositories now, my repository.tsr and africa.tsr, and I want to merge them. I want to merge them in a single TSR file. So for that, you again go to your object repository manager, go to file open, sorry, go to tools, object repository merge tool will be there. Fine. Open this object repository merge tool. A new window will open up. See that there are currently three windows. One is QTP, one is object repository manager, and one is object repository merge tool. Primary file, select it as suppose my repository.tsr. Secondary file, select it as africa.tsr. Click on OK. They will be merged together. You will get a report in the end. Report says that one conflict found. That is, there was a conflict in one test object. One test object was such that it was present in the first repository as well as in the second repository as well. Fine. That was the browser object. In the first repository, the browser name was cnn.com international. In the second repository, the browser name was Africa News. So you don't have to really worry about it. You click OK, close, and you save this repository and click on, I will name it as final. Fine. And close the object repository merge tool and open the final repository. Okay, enable the editing in it, right, and give it some good name it browser. The name in browser conflict is a very common thing. Fine, don't have to worry about it. Now you can share this repository in your test. Okay, so what I have done is I have created my shared repository here. I had these two repository files. I actually converted them to a single file. Now I can share this single file to all my test cases, and if tomorrow there is some change in this, I can make the change in this file and I can simply and changes will simply automatically reflect in all the tests. That's the best advantage. You don't have to, if I'm not using shared repository, what will happen if an object changes tomorrow? Suppose there's a button which changes tomorrow in the application. What will happen? If I'm not using a shared repository, I'm using a local repository, that is each and every test has its own button. Then you will have to go to each and every test and find where that button is used. in each and every of the local repository, and you will have to change that. You will have to update it from application by using this icon, update from application. So that will be a tough thing. Fine. So the solution will be, I will go to my object repository manager, open this shared object repository, and it's also got an update from application. It's got the same menu as object repository. Okay, you update the object from this, and that object will automatically be updated in all the tests, in whichever test you have shared it. Fine. I'll take up a small project on this. I'm just clearing your doubts and I'm just clearing your concepts. Fine. One more thing which is left is, before I start with the project, is that I taught you how to add all the objects in the application. Fine. I taught you that. Fine. Click on add and say this is the browser, and I click on add objects to local. I click on this button, then I click on the page, and when I click on OK, I get this window. I click on OK and all the objects will be added in the object repository. Suppose I want to just add the buttons. I don't want to add all the objects in the page into my repository. I want specific type of objects, like I just want to add images, I just want to add buttons, something like that. You select this radio button, selected object types, click on select, and select the type of objects which you want to put inside your repository. Okay, so I will uncheck all of them. I'll let the link remain there. So now, okay, I accidentally let the frame also remain there. So the frames, browsers, page and links have come. Right? So this is very simple. Very simple. Right? So this is how you can add specific objects from your application into the object repository. Okay? And object repository util object. Now this, I will take this up in advanced QTP. I will tell you what this is actually. This just wanted to give you an overview. You can actually read your object repository from an XML file as well. You can export your object repository to an XML file. You can read it from an XML file, and that is actually done through automation object model of object repository. I'll talk about it in advanced QTP. I just want to give you a brief overview. That is, you can have an XML file. You can say, instead of saving the object repository as a TSR file, you can also save it as an XML file. Okay, just remember this. I will talk about it. Fine. So let's start with that small project now. Okay.